as Steph said, welcome to school. I just wanted to thank you guys for joining, and I especially wanted to call out a couple of people here who were instrumental in helping us set this up, and then that is Steve Graham. Steve, if you're out there, thank you. Dana, and of course, Stephanie, who was instrumental in setting up the curriculum. We're hoping that we can get a lot of good conversations going during this training, and and then also as developers and as people who have built lots of responsive sites so far, we also have a lot of tips and knowledge to hopefully share with you guys too, so that you can go into the design process, thinking about these things and what it means to design for an experience that needs to look great and work well across the spectrum of devices that are out there now. We're no longer dealing with 2 or 3 browsers anymore like we were a couple of years ago. We're dealing with potentially thousands of different browsers and devices out there right now. So it's very, very important for us to make sure that we're getting this right and moving forward in the right way. So I don't want to take up the whole hour talking, even though I probably could. So I'm just going to hand it off to Steph here, and let's get started.
All right, Spell absolutely could talk for an hour, possibly more.
Yeah.
But all right. So starting off here, just a brief introduction of kind of the overview of the entire course. As you know, we've got a couple sessions coming up. We've got this session now. We've got another session next week. And then after next week, there's going to be a bit of a design challenge, which I'll explain next week. And then we'll have a third meetup session after that to kind of go through everything and go through what we've learned and how we can take what we're learning now and how we're working together and bring that back to our everyday office workflow. Because, once you get into the real world, everything that you actually learned in school becomes irrelevant. But we're going to try to do it differently this time. All right, so we're not going to lecture you. We're not going to act like we're all knowing, because we're absolutely not, especially in this kind of environment where you're dealing with new technologies every day, new browsers every day. There's always new stuff happening. And so we've been learning stuff every day. We want to share it with you, and we want you to share things that you pick up with us and different ways of designing sites and things you see that you want to bring to the rest of the team and keep that conversation always going. And we're also going to go through just a bit of the mobile market to get you an idea, because I know when we think of mobile, we think of the iPhone. When we think of tablet, we think of the iPad. That's generally, most of times clients, they'll say the iPad, the iPad, the iPad, but there's so many different devices out there. So give you a brief rundown of that. And as always, this is totally an open forum. So if anytime you want to stop me, ask me something, I should probably actually get, let me go bring this back. Keep this up on screen, so if anyone wants to raise their hand, then I can see that, or I'll check in on the hands, or honestly, just speak up on the phone and interrupt me. I do not mind. Yeah, just to keep the conversation going. So to start off with, the main question: why responsive? Why are we here? Why are we learning this? Why is everyone saying responsive web design? Is this just some fad thing and we can just ignore it? We can't. Absolutely not. The quote up there, users will never want to do that on a mobile device. And a bunch of industry data that's been coming up in the past year pretty much disproves that statement. Users will want to be able to do anything they can do on a desktop, on their tablet, on their phone. So we need to make sure that we're designing sites to structure content in a way that they can access all those different functionalities, all those features, all that content, regardless of what they're browsing on: phone, toaster, etc. Yes, toaster. Okay, so looking at the mobile user base. And if you attended my DigiKnow last week, I think it was, some of these statistics might be review. A couple of them I've actually updated since the DigiKnow, so, fun new numbers. I'm excited. All right, 88% of Americans own a mobile phone. Of that 88%, 56 go online, and of those, 31% only or mostly use the internet on that mobile phone. So that's a lot of people who are only looking on their mobile phone. From a social perspective, 78.9% of US Facebook users, that statistic came out a couple weeks ago, and 60% of Twitter users are accessing sites via mobile devices. And 2 out of every 5 videos streaming from YouTube are being watched on a mobile device. And it's not just social, we're talking about e-commerce and getting into more functions outside of just the entertainment world, things that are more relevant to our industry, because we're talking about jobs, we're talking about people doing kind of important planning in their life, their finance, their healthcare, their job searching. And as we're seeing, mobile users spend 12% of their browsing time shopping, 11% of their time managing finances and health. So mobile users are slowly moving towards more of their general life management online via mobile phone, and we want to be there to meet them. And of course, one of my favorite, the revenue numbers, which always gets, kind of some of the higher ups really going, is the idea that skinnyties.com did a responsive redesign e-commerce site, saw a 42.4% revenue growth across all devices, and 377.6% revenue growth for iPhone. So that's a huge increase. And that's, not changing their product, not changing their core, who they are, their content, just restructuring things and making it so it works better on a mobile device, so it's more accessible. Before we dive deep into responsive, I want to step back and take a note on adaptive, because sometimes the two words are thrown out. It's an adaptive site or responsive site. So I just wanted to quickly show you 2 examples, one adaptive, one responsive, to give an idea of the difference between the two. An adaptive design is one where you basically have kind of 3 different very set views. You have the mobile view, and then when you expand your screen a bit, nothing really changes, and at a certain point you're going to snap. And you're going to see the desktop view, the tablet view. Then it expands a little more and you kind of snap. You see the mobile view. And an adaptive example would be Screaming Frog. Let's get out of full screen for a moment. So here, let's start from the mobile first, because that's how we always like to start. So as you see here, there's a little bit of white space on either side of this. It's not really expanding to fill everything. Then you move up and it kind of snaps, get a little larger, snap again, one more snap. So they're very defined points, and aside from this kind of green background image here, not a lot's really moving or flowing. But when you get a responsive site, such as CSS Tricks, which is developers' great resource, notice how as I'm moving the screen, everything is shifting. Everything is always changing. There's still kind of those snaps you see when you change views, but every single view is very fluid. You're always filling the screen. It always just kind of looks right and works. And those are definitely the kind of designs that we're shooting for, more of the responsive. However, in some cases, you may just have a site where things are really complicated, the way the layout is, it's very precise, and it's something the client really wants there. If the client isn't going to be fluid, then we have to be a little more structured. Then we can do something more of an adaptive design to get those structures.
And there's no shame in going back to a client and saying, listen, there's the way it's been designed doesn't lend itself fully to a responsive experience. Adaptive may be the answer there. So don't worry about saying that you can't be responsive. You certainly can be if the design lends itself to that type of experience, but sometimes it just doesn't, and we can't beat ourselves up over that if we can't do that,
Right, and I mean, it's always good to open up those kind of conversations too with the client about responsive, about adaptive, because sometimes it's the client wants this, because they don't really know that there are any other alternatives, or they don't understand, well, if we structured it a little differently. So that's something, and that's what we try to do as developers. That's what we'd like you guys to do. What we'd like the project managers to do is just keep educating the client. Because again, we're the digital experts.
Right.
Is that what's okay?
The digital brand authority.
We're the digital brand authority. So we're the authority on these things. So we have to educate them.
So that they have to listen to us.
Yep. So just the quick links. We asked you to review the definition of responsive web design and a DAO web design. Those were those 2 links that were in the meeting invite. So just to give you a general overview, the definition was really basic, and I'm going to go into some of the more basics of the design aspect of responsive, and also the DAO web design, which is just a good article to read to kind of get an idea of how you should be thinking about the web. It's something that's always changing, and we kind of have to change with it.
right? And then just a note about that article, it was written 13 years ago. And a lot of the principles in that particular article, still relate to how we design and build websites in 2013 and beyond. It's about accepting the ebb and flow of things and accepting the flexible nature of the browser environment. So if you go into responsive design thinking about those things constantly, about designing around things like content, then you're going to be able to produce, again, better designs that lend themselves better to a fully responsive experience.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Because with responsive design, it's not that there aren't, old challenges or something, or that you have to do things X, Y, Z. You're still going to hit new challenges. There are still ways that you can, you're the creative team, be creative, that sort of thing. So there are always different outlets. It's in a new form. And I think that's why some people are kind of wary of responsive design, because they think, oh, we have to do X, Y, Z, and we have to put the menu button here, and there's no room because there's a small screen. But small screens provide so much canvas for so many different possibilities, especially when you consider how you can do more than just kind of stack content, where you can really get in and figure out how can I design a user experience that translates across all different screen sizes. So let's get responsive and talk about some of the basics. So this is actually a fully responsive site, and the link again is within the other site. It's just so you can see, hey, look at that. Fun times. I'm proud of myself.
She does all of her presentations like this.
Yeah, I build them on responsive web. Yeah, that's the thing. All the material that I'm covering right now, it's online. I will send out the URL after this session so that you have it if you want to review it later, and you can access all the different links that I've showed you today. So let's talk responsive. Progressive enhancement. The survey I sent out, I asked you guys, what you knew about progressive enhancement, and it seemed that there wasn't really a solid understanding. You want more information, which is exactly what we're here to do. So progressive enhancement is basically the idea that you have a core piece of content, a core something, and that you gradually build up upon it. And I think the best way to demonstrate that, and thankfully Spell has development tools already installed on his computer, so I can do that. Let's start from the basic what this content is. So we're going to go in, we're going to disable JavaScript, we're going to disable images, we're going to refresh the page, and then finally we're going to disable all styles. This is the core of my presentation website. Doesn't look particularly pretty, but in the end, this is the important part of the website. So then progressive enhancement is making sure this core is always accessible, no matter what browser, crazy browser settings, IE7 compatibility mode, whatnot you may have, you can see this core. Then progressive enhancement is slowly adding in different things. So you add in images, that's a progressive enhancement. So now you see CSS always comes back. But okay, you can see I've added in CSS and images. So now I've got this really long scrolling page with all these different images. And then JavaScript is another progressive enhancement. So let's say, okay, my user's browser supports images, it supports CSS, and now it supports JavaScript. So we throw on another layer. And if you've ever seen my cupcake video, which I can also provide the link to, it's the same idea. You've got basically the cupcake, you've got the frosting, then you've got the sprinkles. You layer it on. So
progressive enhancement is essentially at the very core of everything we do. We build for the baseline and we enhance that experience for more capable devices. By following that type of methodology, we're ensuring that our sites, in some form or another, are going to be accessible on as many of the different devices that are out there right now. So that's a really important principle that we follow in UI.
Yes, and mobile first goes right along with it, because that's the idea that you're starting with kind of the baseline experience, a limited screen space. It's a limitation, the same as if you're dealing with a browser that doesn't support images or anything. It's very limited. And then as you expand, as your screen gets larger, you've got more space to work with. So then you can start maybe adding more images, adding more functionality, adding, dare I say it, those social sliders that I really hate, but clients really love. So that sort of thing. As you expand. But going along with both of those is the idea of content priority. And I know you guys have a lot of trouble because clients aren't really big on deciding what they actually want on the website. They're really big on saying, we want it to kind of look like this, and then giving you some lip sum, and then kind of throwing you on your way. So that's part of what progressive enhancement and mobile first and this whole idea of content first is having to go back to the client and say, you need to tell us what content you actually want on the site. What is important? What does the user need? Because that helps structure how we're going to lay it out on mobile, how we're going to expand upon it on the larger screen format. And if you notice, I'm trying really hard not to just say mobile and desktop. I'm trying to say smaller screen and large screen because now we've got tablets that are 27 inches, like 27-inch tablet TVs that are touchscreen
As of today,
and different
we have
things.
watches.
As of today, Samsung just announced the Gear?
Smartphone watch?
Yeah,
I don't remember
it's like the Samsung Gear or something.
Yeah, they just released it today.
Yeah. So that's what the developers have been all giggling about all day. We've got a smartwatch to play with now. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So going back to the idea of responsive design and going along with that, everyone's different. Every device has a slightly different browser. Every user has a slightly different version of that browser, depending on when the last time is they decided to upgrade their phone. So the site is never going to look exactly the same on any two devices, and that's okay. As long as it works, it's aesthetically pleasing, it doesn't necessarily have to be identical. And again, this goes back to both, on the design end, being able to accept that things are going to look a little different, and then also educating the client that it's not going to look the same on every browser. And I know on our PDFs that we send out for mocks, at least on the Talent Brew side, we have a little slug at the bottom that says, we designed for modern browsers. It's going to look like what the modern browser decides to look like.
Yeah, right. Each browser vendor has their own implementation of the specifications set forth by the W3C. I know sometimes it's hard for designers to let go of that notion that their things might look a little bit different, especially if you come from a print background where you're used to having a little bit more control over the way things look. On the web, you kind of got to let go a little bit. And I know it's very difficult sometimes. Believe me, I understand where you guys are coming from. But there are just so many different devices out there to support now. It's almost impossible to create pixel perfection across, different browsers now. It's just very, very difficult to do. We in UI development strive to get that right. We want to bring your vision to full fruition in the browser environment, but you have to understand that the browsers and the web are similar to print, but they're not exactly 100% like print. There are some things you have to kind of let go of, and one of those things is understanding that there are going to be differences cross browser, and that the end users, have all of the control over the experience. They're going to do things to your designs that you just don't want them to do, but they're going to do it anyway because that's one of the beautiful things about the web, that the user can come in and change their fonts if they want to. We have to embrace that flexibility and design around it if we can.
Yeah. I promise responsive design is not something I just made up because I'm lazy and don't feel like designing for certain things. I promise. Yeah. It's because the environment, as Spell said, is very open. So a couple of things that always change colors. There's always some differences. Font size and typeface is a big one, especially with web fonts. Some browsers render them slightly pixelated, and sometimes it's not even the browser. It's like the operating system. I know Windows XP has some setting that if it's turned off makes fonts look pixelated. And, it's stuff like that you just have to accept that.
It's wild out there.
Yeah. Yeah, so you want to avoid hacks as much as possible. You just want to let the content exist as it is and let it be fluid because it can still look really great, even if it's not totally, totally perfect.
Yeah, we're going to tell all the dangers of hacking up designs later on because I don't want to overstep my bounds here, but if we start hacking up sites, then we could potentially be harming the end user experience on mobile devices. But we'll talk about that later.
Yeah. Okay, so the fold, the mythical fold on the web. This screen here is I forget exactly what it was. I think the image is linked to it. That screen folds, but there is no such thing as the fold. So I know some clients come back and they're really concerned that everything has to be above the fold. And I guess my response to that in general, and yours should too, would be show me a screen that folds in half, and I will, be more than happy to try and get all the content above that fold. But, again, it's a very print-centric way of thinking. We have to kind of break that. On mobile devices, you aren't going to be able to cram everything into that little tiny, 2 or 3 inches of all of their content, no matter how many carousels you try to fit in one place.
I think on the watch you might just have the logo,
I've heard the watch also tells time. I actually haven't confirmed that yet, though, so don't quote me on it. But yeah, the basic idea, you want to give your content some room to breathe. To everyone, it's a normal workflow for users. They pick up their phone, they'll scroll through, they'll scroll up and down, they'll see everything. So get that main kind of content thing. And again, that comes back to, that's actually I'm going to cover next week a bit of navigation patterns and how to handle menus, making sure that the content gets up there and the menu is still accessible and you can see it, but it's kind of out of the way so that you can get kind of content first, then navigation second, and then your other kind of secondary stuff in there. Declare device independence. That's fun, yeah. That's all CSS, by the way. CSS is really awesome. Anyway, look, I can do it again. Anyway, focusing. So on today's market, and I touched upon this before, there's no tablet. There's no smartphone. You have let's see, I have the numbers here. You have the Samsung Galaxy Mega, which is marketed as a smartphone that has a 6-inch display, and you have the iPad Mini marketed as a tablet that has an 8-inch display. And then you have, the regular Samsung, which has a 4-inch display. So this Galaxy Mega is actually closer to a tablet size than it is to a smartphone, but they're selling it as a smartphone. When I was at an event apart in the beginning of August, I attended a session where we literally spent an hour, and he just went through all of the different devices that had been released in the past year and the different sizes. And, this company decided to release this screen with the 6.3-inch, and then the 6.4-inch came out. So there's no mobile, tablet, desktop. It's just kind of, there's the smallest screen, there's the largest screen, and there's kind of everything in between, which makes it a little difficult when you're trying to deliver something to a client to kind of show all of those different views. But I think the generally accepted practice, from what I understand in the industry from attending event apart and talking to different people on both the design and development side, is to kind of start with that mobile mock-up. This is that mobile view, this is our content priority structure, that sort of thing. And then from the mobile mock-up, build out, the expanded, progressively enhanced desktop mock-up. There's really not a lot of need for a tablet mock-up, because what's a tablet? With all those different devices, what's a tablet? And I know some clients are going to want to see it. And in most cases, it might just be taking your desktop version, shrinking it down a bit, and dropping it into a background of an iPad. And that may make some clients happy. But they have to, that's part of the education, is to understand that there's such a spectrum that you can't define one or the other, because you may not see that specific tablet view on a given tablet, if that makes sense. And do that one more time.
Also, we have to be mindful of the devices that don't exist yet, because there are different devices coming out every single day, and we don't know what's going to be under the Christmas tree next year for folks. So it's important to keep that in mind.
Yep. And this goes back to content priority. When you're dealing with the order of stuff, everything has to kind of, and I'm going to go into this a bit more next week as to why and kind of the dev side of it, all of your content needs to kind of stay in a certain order. So you can't have, content module A and then navigation and sidebar on mobile, and then kind of have, sidebar A, then content, then the other. Everything, if that makes sense. And I've got the little diagram here. So you see, like, on the mobile site, we put the search here, but then a desktop site, suddenly it's jumped down and it's on the bottom. So in general, when you're doing your mocks, you have to keep that content priority consistent across all user experiences.
We'll get into the details later.
Yeah, the nitty-gritty.
Mm-hmm.
Right. We've touched upon this before. The user has ultimate control over the appearance of a website on his or her browser, and this is touching on, this is actually the Cheesecake Factory website. Love their cheesecake, but their website has something to be desired. In that you see here, we've got this it's the static background image that's holding their content. Because it wasn't designed fluidly, If the user decides to increase the text size on their browser, say they have trouble seeing, they need to make it larger, you're seeing here the text is now spilling out of the page and going out. So those are the kind of things we want to avoid in responsive design. And that's why some designs with kind of really tight grids or, okay, all the text has to fit in this one little box, those aren't necessarily the best for responsive design, because you have to remember the user might be doing all sorts of things. So
or
you want to
web
make
design in general, not just responsive design.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. No table layouts.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, the idea that, again, you want your content to be as fluid as possible so that no matter what the user does to it, they're still going to be able to see it all and they don't get this nasty little everything coming over the menu. And again, when I gave you the progressive enhancement demo, you saw how quickly I could just turn off everything that I didn't want. I could have gone through, increased the font
Not that
size.
users do that, but they could. The potential is always there. Again, they have all of the control, so it's just it's important to keep that in mind.
And every once in a while, we will get a complaint from a client who's increased their font size.
Yeah, sure.
To like
we get that one all the time.
Sometimes they increase it to a point that's a little ridiculous,
Yeah.
but they increase it and they're seeing these layout issues, which we can avoid.
I think the general rule when we're developing is we have to be able to scale up our fonts. I think
200% larger, according to the slide that I made, to meet level AA standards for accessibility.
There you go.
Yep. 1,000 words. Okay, so images. The dilemma of images. Now I'm going to say it right off the bat. You can still use images on mobile. I'm never going to say that you can't use images on mobile. I'm just saying on mobile, you need to choose your images carefully to make sure they give some meaningful content to the user. Because remember, when you're dealing in a mobile world, unless you're cool like me and still have unlimited data, I don't know how I made out that long without it. Whenever you're downloading something, that's money from the user's pocket because they have a limited data plan. Every time they're downloading another image, something like that, that's a cost against them. So users, if they see a site that starts loading and it's loading all these images, they're just going to piece because they don't want to have to deal with that heavy load. They don't want to have to deal with waiting for all those images to load. So it's an idea of A, keeping content relevant, and B, keeping the site optimized. But you can still use images on the site. Just I would avoid on mobile sites using a lot of the really standard stock images that are just kind of, generic smiling person in an office, which the client may like and it may be the right thing for the desktop. But on the mobile version, you have to think, I have such limited screen space. Is this really adding anything to the content? Yeah.
That's not to say that at the end of the day you can't use it. We're just asking you to think about, and just ask yourself that question: should I use it? Is it going to interfere with what the user is really there for? Is it adding any value to the overall site? Things like that. To just keep in mind, and to her point about bandwidth and people coming in on 3G connections and stuff like that. That's a cost that we're passing on to them if we're not designing responsibly. Yeah, responsive design. I'm not getting ahead of myself, am I?
I don't think so.
Do you have a slide that says responsible?
I might just pretend
Okay.
you didn't say that and then.
All right, I'm sorry, but this is just stuff we talk about so often that I can't help myself.
Yeah, just remember, faster websites are better user experiences because the web isn't anything new. User, we don't need the web to dance anymore. The user knows what the web can do. They're just going. They want content. They want to get content.
Performance is just as important a part of the design process as the actual creative that you guys produce and all the beautiful work that you guys produce. And we want people to be able to access this stuff on all the devices out there. So we are very, very mindful of performance. We want to make sure that the message we're trying to get out there for the client and get those recruits in is getting out there as quickly and as effectively as it possibly can cross device.
Absolutely. No, I'm going to touch on navigation some more next week, but fat fingers. When you're dealing with mobile, remember that your navigation source is a finger. It's not a mouse. So just make sure all of your buttons, all of your links, there's enough space around them so that, and I'm sure you've been on a site that hasn't been necessarily designed for mobile and there's all those little small links and you're trying to click that one right in the middle and you just keep hitting the wrong one and then you give up. Yeah, so just trying to avoid that on mobile devices. And this is TD Ameritrade, which is one of Spellacy's children, I guess you could say. Form fields, handling form fields within a responsive design. I know on Talent Brew side, we have the data capture form. There's always usually some kind of either custom search stuff on custom as well. It's generally best to not do custom drop downs with, custom colors and buttons. You just want to have the native browser form fields for drop downs for text elements, because on different mobile devices, they have native ways of handling how those are displayed to the user that are generally better than anything we could do. They paid a lot of people a lot of money to come up with the ways these interactions go for it, and we can just piggyback off that and save ourselves a lot of time.
Yeah. Also, from a usability perspective, when you go and start changing drop downs for aesthetic reasons, you could potentially be harming that experience, because people are then not accustomed to the new styles and things of that nature that you're introducing into your piece there. They're used to the way things behave on their mobile browsers. So, changing it up could potentially cause, I suppose, a bit of confusion there. So you have to approach that way with caution.
Yep. And over here to the left, this is a form field on the Nissan site. May it rest in peace. And so this is how it's handled on the tablet. You see that's the select, and that's the same element on the right on an Android phone. So you see same functionality handled in different ways based on the native device. Web harmony. This is probably one of the most important slides on this presentation, and it's the idea that in our workflow, we need to make sure that development and design and IXD and project, really everyone from the get-go, is on the same page with what the concept is, how we want to move forward with it, and just always be working with one another. We want to try to move away from where, design gets the concept, they're on the kickoff call, and they make the PSD, and then it's all done, and then they send it over to development for review. We really want, as you're working through things, if you see something you don't necessarily know what to do, just shoot an email to one of the developers. I think we have, is it UI? RWD at
RWD at tmp.com.
Yeah, we have a whole email for that. So if you ever have questions.
Yeah, anything specific to responsive design, just email that, and some brain will chime in.
Yeah, because it's better, it saves you time instead of sitting there, well, I don't really know what to do, and maybe I'll go back later after it goes to, just ask us now while you're in the moment, know? And there's enough Skype and screen share and link and technologies that even if you aren't in the same office and can't talk to them, you can share what you're working on with them in some way so that we can all work together.
Yeah, right. And I just got out of a 4-hour meeting talking about agile development, and agile development is very collaborative. You're all working together as a team, it's less of a siloed approach, less of a waterfall approach to development. And as TMP becomes more of a software agency, which is what we are becoming, slowly but surely, that type of environment, working together with each other is going to be important moving forward.
Yeah, and you don't need to have 4-hour meetings to meet with developers.
Yeah, just come and knock on my door.
Quick IM cost. Although if you knock on Spell's door, he may talk your ear off for like an hour. But I enjoy it. We need to do that again for the benefit of everyone. Of the classic Batman fans out there.
Yeah.
So here I've just got a couple links. I won't take you through them now. You can go through at your own pace. Responsive websites done by TMP. I need to change the Nissan Global to no longer in development because the client actually went to another company to get designs that were not made responsive, then decided they didn't want a responsive site and wanted the whole, I'm seeing a lot of sympathetic nods in the room, so I think it sounds like something that is, it happens sometimes. And yep, still have questions. Send a signal to UI Super Friends at rwd@tmp.com. One more time. Okay. So those are some of the basics of responsive design. And now that we've taken you through the 101, we've got about 15-20 minutes. So I just kind of want to open it up to you guys. Given what I've just presented to you, what kind of questions do you have? What concerns do you have? What do you want to learn more about? I'm opening it up to the, I don't have any questions on the all call, but I'm opening up to anyone on the call as well. Just jump right in. because the best way for us to kind of figure out where to go from here and is to have the kind of conversations with you.
I have a question in Chicago.
Yeah.
If we're starting with mobile first and then we're doing progressive enhancement, what will our final deliverables be in terms of, our basic mobile design and copy, and then increasing from there? How many sets do we see? I mean, what sort of deliverables are you looking for programming?
I think the basic deliverables here would be the mobile mockup and then kind of the full expanded desktop version. And then in between is where some of the conversation with the developer comes into play, because there's not really a way, although later today, actually, TMP is hosting in New York a demo of Adobe Edge Reflow, which is a software that actually allows you to build kind of responsive PSDs, from my understanding. But just working off your basic Photoshop and your basic deliverables, I would say a mobile version of the site, an expanded, big quote-unquote desktop large screen version of the site. And then in between, a lot of it kind of depends on the design, on going back and forth with the developer. But in terms of deliverables, most clients will be satisfied. They see the mobile, they see the desktop. And then I would say don't do a tablet unless there's a specific request for it, because, again, as I said before, what's a tablet? Does that answer your question?
Okay. Yeah, that helps.
Okay.
Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
I got one more question. How do you guys feel about if we need to? A lot of times we're trying to simplify the sites a lot and not put all the content at once on the main page, because clients like to have lots of stuff. And we've been using the use of pop-ups a lot and like light boxes. Is that easy for you guys to convert to like a mobile or a tablet, or what would you guys prefer versus like maybe an accordion fold, or like how would you guys what would you guys recommend for hiding and showing content?
I don't like to limit you guys. I want you to be as creative as you want to be. I don't want to I don't want to impose any technical limitations on you. But I mean, for mobile, what we typically do is we'll build. Progressive enhancement means building a site that works at its base. So we'll we use something called feature detection to detect when somebody might be using a touch device, or we'll use the width of the screen as an indicator to introduce more advanced elements on the page, like modal windows and things of that nature. So I mean, really, it's whatever you feel is appropriate to the end user experience is the answer I want to give you here, because I don't want you guys to be less creative. I want you to be more creative, push the boundaries and do whatever you want. And then we'll have those conversations when we need to have them, throughout the design and development process.
Cool.
Any other questions?
So, what is the parallax and responsive?
Okay, parallax and responsive. Can I take this spell? Because you're gonna need to cry for a bit. Okay. A couple of things with parallax. Disregarding the fact that from a technical standpoint, parallax and responsive is a nightmare, an absolute nightmare. Going from the user standpoint, parallax in general doesn't add too much to the user. It just kind of looks cool. It doesn't add a great deal to the user experience, especially when you have such a content-heavy site like we do. When you've got stuff kind of moving everywhere and all up and down, it's more of a distraction than anything else. From an optimization standpoint, parallax sites require usually a heavy amount of code, and that can really weigh down a site. I remember part of a presentation at Event Apart, there was one parallax scrolling site that weighed in at something like 33 megabytes, which is obscene.
Yeah.
That's nuts.
So yeah, that's
Yeah,
just
because I've seen some works great and some of them.
yes, some of them. Yeah, right.
Spotify just did that. Wasn't I telling you that?
I think so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the new Spotify. So
Yeah.
well, basically it's the honey.
That's not, that's not to say that you guys can't have them, but what we typically do is like, we'll only do them we'll only do them in environments where that we're sure about. Desktop, non-touch devices, we'll load in the appropriate scripting, for those experiences, and you can have them there. But anywhere else, it's very, very difficult to pull off. Very difficult.
And what do you say then about Parallax that uses background video instead of images?
Yeah,
and that's becoming very hard too.
I know it's becoming hard.
Yeah, but the clips are short and they move, but it's another element.
Let me just say that mobile is so big now. All right, and even if we don't go responsive, even if we don't build a responsive site, even if we're just sticking to good old-fashioned fixed width, right, and we're loading in videos and doing all this other stuff, you still have to be mindful of the fact that people are going to be accessing those sites on mobile devices. So you have all that heavy duty, all that heavy duty stuff in there is going to create a poor experience on these devices. So you have to be very, 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 very mindful of that. Even if you're not going responsive, this site can still be accessed on mobile. How is it going to affect that experience?
So to piggyback off that spell, then what happens when a client is kind of gung-ho for something like that? Are we still building mobile-only sites? So
They're
separate
gung-ho
mobile and desktop sites for clients,
Well,
or is that the way we want to?
Sometimes it does expand on. Sorry. Sometimes it does depend on on what the user is looking for. There's no shame in going in saying, listen, what you want here is like really, really advanced, and it's going to take a long time to build. It's going to be very heavy. There's no shame in saying that you need a separate mobile experience. I think the problem that a lot of the search engines have now, or Google, will actually penalize you if you build a desktop site and you're not serving out the same equivalent content on the mobile site. If somebody shares a link to the mobile site, they should be taken to the equivalent page on the desktop version of the site. Again, we can still do those types of things, but we just have to be, ready to, roll up our sleeves. Sites like that are going to take a little bit longer to build, and there's a lot of work involved in building, one site that works well on all these different devices out there. That's the thing. People always try to put a number on it. But it's difficult sometimes. It's difficult to say this is going to be, cost 20% more, because a lot of times we don't know. When we're giving our initial estimates on something, we have no idea, until we start seeing designs and start seeing concepts and ideas, how long something is going to take to build. So I know everybody hates this answer, but it depends. It really depends on the direction you're going in and the type of technology you want to leverage, in that, experience. So just
a question. Going back to using the Parallax or video or anything that is heavy, doesn't the responsive design actually solve this problem? Because when you view it on a small device, you just eliminate those extra features.
Get this one.
Okay. When you're dealing with, it is true that there are some back-end technologies that can kind of do pseudo feature detection and again, from a development standpoint, there's no real perfect feature detection, which drives us mad.
Yeah.
But when you have a site, if you're hiding something, it's still loading on the site.
Still loading behind the scenes.
Which is even worse because you're loading the stuff and then you're not showing it to the user, so you're literally just kind of ripping money out of their wallet and ripping stuff away from their data and being like, you can't see this.
There's only text on the site. Why does it take it so long to load? That's because you're hiding huge images behind the scenes and stuff like that. There are ways to take that out programmatically. We can use backend technology to do that. We can even use JavaScript to a large degree. But there are no guarantees. There are no silver bullets for solving a lot of these. There are some shortcomings with responsive design, but hopefully, as the years progress, we'll be able to solve a lot of these issues more easily. responsive images are a big issue right now because there's no good way to load in smaller images. There's no standardized way to load in smaller images for smaller screens, and there's no good way to measure bandwidth. Ideally, the best way to handle this type of stuff would be to measure the bandwidth that the people are coming in on. If you can measure the bandwidth, then you can serve out a more streamlined experience for that particular the device. But right now, there's really not a good way to do it. We're still making a lot of assumptions, about screen width and feature detection and things of that nature. So it's not perfect yet, but it's getting there. So we just have to be patient. Hopefully, we'll get there sooner or later.
Yep. And I mean, that's not just us as a company. That's across the board in the world of development. It's still trying to figure these things out because technology is coming up with stuff, and they don't tell us what's going on until they announce it, and then we're like, how do we build for that?
Yeah.
Yep. Questions in the room? Questions on the phone? Bueller?
All right. What time is it?
It is 3:51, and I'll give one last call for questions. Otherwise, I will dismiss class for the day. I've already sent out the base invite, just the placeholder for next week's session. So I'll update that with the GoToMeeting information. I'm going to throw 2 other quick articles your way that I'd like you to read beforehand. And then we will cover, let's see what I said we're going to be covering next week. A little bit of HTML, CSS, just some baby stuff because, developers have a base understanding of Photoshop. Some designers know a bit about how development works, but I'd like to just give everyone kind of a brief overview so everyone is kind of on the same page with that. And then I'll take you through some navigation patterns and the now defunct but still living on QA Nissan site. So thanks. And again, if anyone has any questions, feel free to email me, email Spell, and class dismissed.